Hi, this is Stephen E. Andrews, Outlaw Bookseller. Welcome back to Reading List Rock, and we're continuing with our stroll through the avenues of the work of the Stranglers. And it's the 30th of October, Halloween tomorrow, Saturday. Hope to upload this later on today. And I thought I'd talk today about George Melly, who we know and love exclusively through the Stranglers, through his contribution to the Walk On By 7-inch single, which of course was issued after the white EP. This is a Japanese variant, so which I'm sure many of you have bought it back at the time, and very handsome it is. And I used to get these from Adrian's in Wickford in Essex on mail order, which was really exciting at the time, and I think they were about £2.75 a piece, and I've got 7 or 8 of them, probably maybe a few more. I'm sure lots of you guys have them as well. And there's George on the back. And when the single came out, which would have been 78, and I think we were all feeling that sort of punk was pretty much over, and things were going more new wave. Some people have argued that Black and White, of course, is the first post-punk album, and I think there's a strong evidence to support that. Obviously Joy Division get the trendies going, and nothing wrong with Joy Division, a great band, but the Stranglers pretty much were there first, as we know. And this was an odd one because of course 75,000 copies of the white EP had been given away, so to get Walk On By again so people just buy it seemed like hubris on the part of the band, but they were so popular that it didn't really matter. Got up to number 21, 22, but they didn't care really. I mean, they'd done so well in the last sort of year, biggest band in Britain and what have you. So George Melly, that was the first a lot of us encountered him, and this is his book Owning Up, which I want to talk about today. I want to talk a bit about George and the fact that this book Owning Up is really well worth reading, and why as a Stranglers fan you should read it. So let's go forward. Well, Melly was a jazz singer, an art critic, general sort of raconteur, good time guy. I used to see him in Bath years ago in the 80s and 90s. He would pop up there now and again. I think one of his daughters lived in Bath, because she's a Facebook friend of a friend of mine who's a travel writer. And I would see him in the street walking along in a very loud suit and a big hat. He was a real character. I never got to speak to him. I was a little bit in awe of going up to him and saying hi. I don't know why, because he always seemed very nice, but there you go. So as I say, he was a jazz singer, and Melly was really popular as a jazz singer. There were hit singles in the 60s, one called Nuts, which is a song about peanuts. As you can see, the sort of innuendo type thing that the Stranglers are doing with songs like and so on. I say real larger than life character, good time guy. And Melly was part of the trad jazz revival. Now, trad isn't a form of jazz I particularly like. I tend to prefer sort of post-bebop, classic modern jazz, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, those sort of people, which I think most of us who like rock and roll tend to like that sort of modernist period more than anything else. But trad was a bit like punk rock in that it was primal. It was going back to the beginning of the music as it was first recorded, and George writes about that in this, and this is the first of 3 autobiographical volumes he wrote. These days you can't get this one separately, though do look for it second hand. You can only get them in an omnibus, which is also called Owning Up, which is really confusing. This is what it looks like. So this was the first one he wrote, but the 3 autobiographical volumes, they go in reverse order. So Melly said about this that he quoted the Danish existentialist philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, who said, "Life is lived forwards but understood backwards." So Melly wrote about his adulthood first, his youth next, and his childhood before that. So his childhood is in a book called Scouse Mouse, which I think is the weakest of the 3 volumes. His youth is in a book called Rum, Bum and Concertina, and his adulthood as a jazz singer and art gallery worker are in this one. In the omnibus I've just shown you, they print them in chronological order of his life, which was missing the point, because he said he wanted it to be read in the other direction, the way they were published, in terms backwards as it were in terms of the internal chronology. So I would say the secret to, really to Melly is to try and pick up a copy of this. It was in print for years and years and years. I bought mine in Cardiff in 1981 in a great bookshop called Chapel & Verse, which is no longer there, just round the corner from Spiller's Records, which is still there, which is why I met the Stranglers the first time in '79. It's a really great book, and it's very, very much like the sort of lifestyle he had is similar to the Stranglers, in that he was a real rebel and an outsider, and a very, very funny guy. And this is full of brilliant anecdotes of playing trad jazz around the pubs, clubs of London and all the UK, the late 50s, early 60s. Really, really good. There's constant band changes, lots of great characters. He's got a real flair with words. And this was the first book I ever read by a jazz person. And even though it didn't get me into jazz, that came much, much later, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I've read this book at least 12, 15 times, maybe more. And I'd say any Stranglers fan would love it, because it is about, you know, it's not rock and roll, but it's as close as you can get. There's lots of sex, drinking, and what have you, bad behaviour, and it's really, really great fun. So do go for that. So apart from that, what did Melly do? Well, Melly used to write for newspapers, and he wrote books. He wrote a book called Revolt into Style in the late 60s, which was an examination of pop, and he meant pop in its broadest possible terms. Not just pop music, but the whole phenomenon. The word pop was on everybody's lips then, because of pop art was big in the 60s with Warhol and Lichtenstein, and obviously that exploded into the counterculture through the whole hippie thing and people taking acid and what have you. And people were interested in what was popular, and that really came out in Britain really in the late 50s in an exhibition called This Is Tomorrow, which has connections again to Roxy Music via Richard Hamilton, the artist who taught Brian Ferry fine art at the University of Newcastle. So it was already something that had been in the air for a long time. And interestingly, this is a record from, I think it's '79. This is Revolt into Style by Bill Nelson's Red Noise. And it's really, really great. And George Melly wrote a book called Revolt into Style about pop and the phenomenon of pop, the success of the Beatles, and how the popular was infecting everybody's lives. And it's a really, really good book. You can still get it. I think it's print on demand, which means you won't find it in a bookshop. You've got to order it, especially, and the publisher prints it off for you. It's well worth the read. And it was a very influential book. And I say this Bill Nelson Red Noise single comes on blue vinyl here on Harvest. If you don't know this, it's really good. Bill Nelson was in a band called Bebop Deluxe. We're a sort of techno-flash glam band. And this was when punk and new wave came along. He realised he needed to get up to speed, and they made this. It's a bit like XTC without the sort of silly vocals. I mean, sorry if you like XTC, I do myself. But this has got great lyrics about fashions rising and falling and revolting into style. And it's very, very much that, you know, clothing and the way you look is about rebellion. So it's really great stuff. So Melly wrote this book called Revolt into Style, which directly inspired this. And of course, Melly was a big fan of the Stranglers. He described them in a TV programme as heirs to the throne of Dada. Dada, of course, is a Germanic word that means rocking horse, and it was used by the anti-art movement, which was around from beginning of the end of the First World War, that preceded surrealism. And it must have been a really shocking thing then, because they did stuff that made no sense whatsoever. And, you know, he could see that sort of strange element in the Stranglers, so he described them as that. And Hugh Cornwell then later appeared on Gallery, the art quiz that Melly was often comparing, so there was a connection there. So if you want a really great read and discover why the Stranglers reached out to Melly, because he was a kindred spirit, I would really say pick this up. It's really, really funny, great anecdotes, one of the best music books I've read by a naturally gifted writer and a natural outsider and rebel. So that's one to look out for. Next time I see you, I'm probably either going to talk about the strange career of Bernard Wolfe, or possibly the Stranglers and science fiction, which is quite interesting. I haven't decided yet which. It depends on how I feel on the day. I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for subscribing and watching the videos. I know it's been a big boost for me to have the Stranglers fan base on my side, so thanks a lot, guys. I really, really do appreciate it. And do share this to your chums who might not have seen any of my clips. And if there's anything you'd like me to cover, I am going to cover Tyler on the Sea at some point. Somebody's asked for that. Do let me know and I'll do what I can. Have a great Saturday. Take it easy, kick back, have a beer, and play the new album. This is Outlaw Bookseller signing out for now.